Welcome back into Live Now from Fox, where we are going to continue with yet another story that we are following very closely as we bring you this, a live image that we have out of Minneapolis in Minnesota. Now, demonstrations did continue on throughout the weekend after the shooting of Renee Good at the hands of an ICE officer in South Minneapolis. The 37-year-old was fatally shot by an ICE officer identified as Jonathan Ross. Federal officials claim self-defense, but local officials have disputed that claim after reviewing videos of the shooting. Let's talk a little bit more about where this investigation stands and how the case is going to go moving forward. So joining us now is criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool. Brian, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Great to be with you, Carol.
Of course. All right, so let's just break it down for our viewers first, though. When we talk about a situation in a case that involves federal officers within city jurisdiction, how does this normally play out, and what's the involvement like between local and federal officers?
Yeah, just to let you know, too, by way of my background, I have been involved over the last decade in at least 10 officer-involved shootings throughout the state of California, in 6 different counties across the state. So I have a pretty good grasp of how these cases are handled. And what you have in Minneapolis is a shooting that involves both potential federal civil rights violations. That would be under the 4th Amendment for what's called an unreasonable search and seizure. So that's why the FBI and the DOJ are involved in the investigation. Then also you have a potential for state claims, because remember, in an officer-involved shooting case like this, you can be prosecuted in both state and shooting case like this. You can be prosecuted in both state and federal court. And the state charge, in this case, if it's ever brought, would likely be a second-degree manslaughter, which means homicide by negligence. And then back to your question, typically in a situation like this, it would be a joint investigation with both federal authorities likely taking the lead, but state investigators would also be allowed to participate in that investigation. And then they would share the evidence that would then lead to the state and Fed making independent decisions on whether the ICE agent is prosecuted.
And that kind of sets the stage for this next question, because we have heard that right now federal investigators are not allowing those local investigators to get in to this entire case. They're going to conduct it on their own. And so local attorneys are kind of pushing back on that, because obviously they want to be part of all of these findings and what's going to come out of this. So what exactly are state and local investigators going to do at this moment? Are they allowed to do anything now that federal agents have decided to completely take over?
Carol, this is unprecedented. I have never seen a shooting death case involving a police officer here or a government agent like an ICE agent where one jurisdiction takes over the investigation and does not allow the other jurisdiction. So I have never seen this before. I personally don't think it's a good idea, because like I just said, you have a potential to have charges brought both by the state and the federal government. So this is odd. I don't know what recourse the state would have. Potentially, the state attorney general might file some type of legal document asking for possibly an injunction to enjoin the federal government from just doing an independent investigation on its own, to allow the state to join in on the investigation as well.
And Brian, obviously, a lot of the witnesses are going to be important when it comes to how this investigation moves going forward. So I'm going to play out some of the video that we've had. Of course, a lot of cell phone video has continued to pour in from different perspectives given that incident that happened. So I'm going to play this first one here, just kind of showing it here on the screen. Brian, talk to us about the importance of getting all of these different angles and really how attorneys are going to be able to piece together what happened based off of all of these videos.
Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about what evidence needs to be gathered in a shooting death case involving an ICE agent. There's a lot of different evidence. Let's start with the with the video evidence you're talking about. You've got the ICE agent actually videotaping with his phone. You've got Miss Good's partner videotaping with her cell phone. We don't know whether the vehicle driven by the ICE agent has what's called audio dispatch. For your viewers, I mean, every police car has audio dispatch where there's communication between an ICE agent and a supervisor. So we've got to look at to see if audio dispatch, in other words, you need to glean what happened in the minutes or hour leading up to the confrontation. And then I think an important component of this case that could be one of the most important parts of it is what's called a shooting reconstruction. What do I mean by that? I've seen it many times in my cases where you hire a forensic shooting reconstruction expert. What do? They are able to take the vehicle, Correll. The vehicle is an important piece of evidence. And you look at where the bullet entered the window, and then you use that in conjunction with the autopsy report. The autopsy report is going to dictate where the bullet entered Miss Good's head. Was it the front of her head? Was it the side of her head? Was it the back of her head? And what's the trajectory of that bullet? And they have amazing technology with lasers to determine exactly the angle of the bullet and where it was shot. Why is that important? Because in an investigation like this, every individual shot is analyzed separately. You don't just clump the 3 shots here separately. There were 3 shots. It's my understanding the first shot missed, the second shot hit, the third shot missed. So the key is going to be in the autopsy report, where did that bullet enter? Let's say hypothetically it entered on the side of her head, like near her left temple. That's extremely important because then an argument could be made that at the time that shot was fired, that Good's SUV, her van, had already passed the officer. Because think about it, the bullet would have to enter coming through the window like this, and that arguably the ICE agent was not in an imminent position of grave bodily harm at the time. And then one other thing you want to be looking at here are past training records of the ICE agent. And then another thing would be complaints. Have there been any citizen complaints or internal affairs investigation of the ICE agent to see whether over the past decade there were any complaints, for example, of this ICE agent using excessive force?
Something else, Brian, that I want to touch on before I let you go is really what ICE agents are allowed to do. How does it compare with local law enforcement? In a situation like this, you kind of touched on it briefly, how it's going to be analyzed with this case moving forward. But there's a lot of protests also happening out there on the street. ICE agents are still deployed in federal cities. What should people keep in mind when it comes to the protections that ICE agents have and what they're allowed to do under their particular set of rules?
Yeah, great question. So the governing rules involving an ICE agent's behavior in an apprehension like this are through the Department of Homeland Security. So DHS has its own set of policies and procedures that ICE agents are to follow. And I've looked at the ones that apply to this type of shooting, and they're very similar, if not identical, to what the generally accepted police practices protocols are for state police departments and city police departments throughout the country. And what do I mean by that? Well, the core policy that would be involved here, Correll, would be, in my opinion, 2 things. One is what is the proper police protocol in approaching the vehicle? We haven't talked about that. And by the way, not a lot of people in the country are talking about that. What they're doing is they're just focusing on, was the ICE agent able to deploy deadly force given this situation? But let's talk quickly about what led up to that. Typically, when you're pulling a vehicle over, and here you hear the ICE agent saying, "Get out of the car." So they wanted Miss Good to get out of the car. Why is that important? Because if you want to pull somebody out of a car, most policies across the country do not warrant you going right up to the car. It's dangerous to go up to the car and grab the handle of the car, because then you could be dragged by the vehicle if the vehicle then accelerates, right? And another thing, you're not supposed to be standing in front of a vehicle or an SUV in this situation as well. Why? Because if the vehicle accelerates, you could be hit. So The most proper protocol in pulling somebody over in a car and wanting them out of the car is approaching at an angle behind the left driver's side of the door. And then you have another ICE agent that would go around Miss Good's vehicle, right? And then look through the window, the passenger side window, for example, to determine whether the driver has a weapon. That's usually what you do on the other side, to look through, and then they communicate on whether there's a weapon. That didn't happen here, but I'm not sure that will be dispositive. I think what's going to be dispositive is the second component that I want to talk about, which is what's the DHS policy on shooting your gun at a moving vehicle. And it's pretty clear, much like all the state and local police practices, that you're not supposed to shoot at a moving vehicle unless there is no other way that you can get out of harm's way. And that's going to be really, I think, the central issue here. And why is that policy nationwide? Because of crossfire. Think about it here, Carell. You had 2 bullets that missed. Somebody could have been on the other side of the vehicle, and they could have been hit and possibly killed as well.
Brian Claypool, criminal defense attorney, we appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox. As you mentioned, there's still a lot of questions kind of going into this entire case and a lot to really break down and analyze. You've brought up some really good points. We'll have to see where this goes moving forward, and some unprecedented moves, specifically when you talk about the fact that local and state agencies have pretty much been barred from investigating this along with federal agents. But Brian, we look forward to checking in with you soon as we continue to get more developments.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.